Welcome back to Nomad Boatbuilding. We're taking a short break from woodworking and trying our hand at some blacksmithing. In the last episode, we took a tour of my friend Paul's island blacksmithing shop and stumped some anvils for an upcoming weekend of smashing steel with master blacksmith Sandra Dunn from Ontario. Now I've got a few projects in mind, so let's fire up the forge, get those anvils warmed up, and get right into it. So we're essentially trying to make this right here. So Japanese boat building chisel, it's basically a mortising chisel, and it punches a hole that you drive a nail into. That's really all it does. And then it's got these hilts on here, and the name Tsubonomi actually translates to like sword hilt. So that's what these little lugs are on. That's because when you're using it, you drive your chisel in and then you smack the back of that to get it out. We've been starting out with a little billet, basically about 2.5 inches of this 1-inch round bar. Weld a sacrificial arm onto it to something to hang on to, and then we slowly start drawing it out. And here's a test piece Paul did. So that same slug, most of it is like this. Draw the blade out of one side, tang out of the other, and then you got this hilt that's in the center. So that's my goal right now. And so while I'm working, I also have another iron in the fire, so I'm making nails as I go. So this slug right here is going to become my Tsubonomi. So we're going to draw out the blade, draw out the tang. So I've got a little bit of experience doing some blacksmithing, but not a lot. And this is my first time using a power hammer. And I have to say that I am sold. So here I'm just trying to draw that billet down, make it a little bit flatter, a little bit longer. And then Paul and I are going to put a divot into it using this guillotine from Stewart Mountain Forge. This is a great little piece of kit here. Stewart Mountain Forge makes blacksmithing tools right here in Victoria, and they distribute their stuff through Princess Auto. This is not sponsored, just good stuff.
I think we're there for this piece. I think we're probably pretty near where you want to be for drawing.
So the idea is that one side of this billet will get the blade drawn out of it, and then the hilt and the tang will come out of the other end. And this divot is the way to get started. I absolutely loved using this power hammer. I'm afraid I don't recall what the manufacturer is, but it's a great little piece of kit. Now there's a pedal you step on, and the harder you step, the harder it hits. So it only took a few minutes to get a feel for how to have a light touch with this thing. This is a machine that's incredibly intimidating before you start using it, but once you get into it and you get a feel for it, you'll never want to be without it. So I've got my blade drawn out pretty much to where it needs to go for the time being, and I want to try and refine the shoulders. So this is Sandra helping me out using a flatter. That's what we call that little hammer I'm holding onto the blade. And the idea is that we're going to try and sharpen up those corners. Now, unfortunately, this is not going as planned, and my hammer, the flatter that is, takes a little bit of a dive down into my blade, and it has caused some little divots, which I am not happy about. So for the next little bit, we're going to try and fix that. So Sandra has advised me to just start by flattening things out. My first step in trying to get rid of these divots is to try and get rid of the sharp corners that exist in them. So I'm doing that using a technique called hot rasping. So basically using what is like a coarse farrier's rasp on the very hot metal. Next, we're going to try and upset the length of the blade. That is, we're going to try and swell out the area where the divots are. We're going to push metal back down into that area. So we're going to do that by heating this up with a torch and then driving down on the length of the blade to squash it vertically. This is kind of the magic of blacksmithing, the fact that we're treating metal like plasticine. The original size and shape of the material you're working with can be entirely different than what you're shooting for at the very end, which is just so different from woodworking that it's hard to wrap your head around. So it took 2 or 3 rounds of this upsetting to try and get enough metal back down into that area that I could largely get rid of those divots. I couldn't get them to go away completely. I'm sure if I put more time into upsetting it, I probably could have. But as this is a learning experience, I'm not worried about absolute perfection. The goal here for me is to just try and produce something that's functional and, more than anything else, try and figure out how to develop this shape. I'm not done yet, but this is how far I've gotten so far. So we've got like a long taper here, and the style I'm making is one that's got like a chisel end, so it's a bit like a British mortising chisel. So this still needs grinding because it's going to have a slight, be like a diamond profile in through here. Just slim it out at the edges, but leave some strength. And I still need to tighten up on the shoulders here and then form a tang to attach it to a handle. So while the heats are going on, I've been just knocking out nails. So Japanese style boat builders nails. So each of these is sized to match the chisel. So if you got the chisel here, you got a nail that's sort of normally just, you know, a hair bigger than the chisel. So it's a little heftier. I'm not sure, like, if I've never even seen one of these in real life, so I'm not sure if they should be tapered or if they should be dead flat. But for the most part, they're big enough that they don't swim around in the hole that you make with your mortising chisel. So in between heats, I've been knocking these out, and I've been doing those like out of rebar, basically flattening rebar, and then punching out these guys. So that's been a good practice to get rolling at. I've been sort of getting faster and faster at it. Each of these nails involves drawing out a taper of maybe 8 to 10 inches long. My nails are about 4 or 5 inches long, so I'm basically trying to get one end flattened down far enough that it's close to done. And then I come along and I put a tip on there. So the goal is to set the end of the nail right there at that little rounded edge on the anvil so that your hammer will kind of glaze off of that. It was surprising just how much technique was involved trying to learn how to get that little chisel tip with just a few blows and get it even. So once I got all of that refined to my liking, I would mark the length of my nail with a piece of soapstone and then use this cut-off hardy to just give it a bit of a nick. Shouldn't be using this cold, but I was just trying to mark my spot. So when I came along with the hot nail, it would land right into that little nick and I could perform the cut-off operation. So you kind of give it a whack, give it a quench, and then it breaks free. Next we reheat and we form the head. These anvils from Benvor with this triangular tail, I really got to like using those. I've only ever used this sort of classic English pattern anvils, so these ones were kind of interesting to get a feel for, and I have to say if I were to be buying an anvil, I'd be looking at one of these with this long flat tail piece. So today we're firing up the coal forge because we're going to do some socket work, probably produce a slick. So I've got a big old leaf spring and we're going to form a fusion welded socket on the end of it, and of course shape the rest of the blade into whatever. Okay, so we're going to try and produce a slick using this leaf spring here, and we're going to do a fusion welded socket on that. So my first job is to try and flatten this guy out a little bit because it's still got the wow to it, which is fine. I want that in there, but for working on it, we're going to flatten it out. And then I've got to start by necking this down over here.
Right here.
The leaf spring is too wide to fit into the Stuart Mountain forged guillotine, so Sandra is going to help me neck this down using a bit of bar stock lying around the shop and this swaging tool. Perfect?
Yeah.
Go. Flip.
Want to flatten first? And then flip it over. Go straight. Okay.
I'm not sure what side we were working on.
That's good. If they're even enough, then doesn't
Well, I
matter,
don't know if
does
they're
it?
even enough. I just can't remember.
Well, I'm just trying to get it so you can fit it in the guillotine tool, right?
Gotta remember how I was holding it at the bendy tang.
Right. Okay.
We decided we needed to increase the size of that divot that we were creating, so we're switching to some heavier bar stock to recreate this setup.
On your hands for the
I think one of the most important lessons I learned this weekend is despite the plastic nature of metal, you need to really focus on maintaining symmetry from the very start. Because once things start to go out of alignment, it can be really challenging to try and bring them back. Case in point is while we were necking this down, Sandra seemed to be hitting that swage a little off to one side because of the height of the table. So we decided to try using larger diameter bar stock to try and even out that swaging. And that seemed to work pretty good.
So I've got my blade necked down here. This is going to become a socket. And now I just want to bring my shoulders down here. I don't want the sharp shoulders on this chisel. I want long tapered ones. So that's my next step. So I'm going to start putting this back to the fire, bringing those shoulders down.
If there's one thing Paul and I have in common beyond liking to make stuff, it's a love for eating well. Paul stuffed these squash flowers with goat cheese and fried them up right there on the forge. They were fantastic.
Lunch is over, getting the forge heated back up. I got to switch to working on the coal forge, so I got a bit of burning. I wasn't paying attention. I was screwing around making those stupid nails and ended up roasting my edge a little bit, so I had to grind that back. We're back in action. I was been trying to work this on the power hammer, but man, it's really hard to get the feel right.
Now the main difference between working with a propane forge and working with a coal forge is that the coal forge can get a heck of a lot hotter, so you got to stay on top of it or you could burn your steel. That's a lesson you learn the hard way when you start messing around with these coal forges. So one of the interesting things about blacksmithing is blacksmiths tend to make most of their own tools, and as a result they'll often modify their tools on the fly. So here Paul is just adjusting these tongs in order to hold on to this particular thickness of plate. Back to my slick. My job now is to try and flare this out far enough to form my socket. So we use a little bit of math to figure out how far I need to flare it. So the diameter times pi. I wanted about a 1¼ inch diameter chisel handle, so we're looking at about 4 inches plus a little extra for the scarf.
Chisel.
I flared out my chisel tang to the right width. Now I just need to try and taper out those edges so that we can do the fusion welded socket. A few blows along that softened edge of the anvil should do the job pretty nicely. Lastly, I'm trying to create a little step where the socket transitions to the blade so that the socket area is thin enough to roll around into a cone. Okay, I've got my socket ready to start rolling. Let it go around. Flattened out little haunch here for the neck, so it's going to roll this way. I mean, it would make a bad slick right now. But, so I'll put this to the heat and hope that we do not burn it, because that would suck. If you've been enjoying these videos and you'd like to help me keep making more, I encourage you to join me over on Patreon. You can find links in the corner or down in the description.
Now that you've got it started, you can just roll it right around on the anvil.
Okay.
Yeah, and then you won't have to worry about dinging it on the inside of those edges, which
right.
you haven't done yet.
Yeah.
That's great. But you're gonna hit here,
Okay.
and then you're gonna roll it here, and you're gonna roll here, and you're
Okay.
gonna focus on this part
Got
right
it.
here.
All right.
Roll it, roll it, roll. So right now, what I'd do is I would focus on that side there, try to bring it in like you kind of brought it
Focus on which
there.
side?
This one.
So, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, to get them more even. But
Yeah.
you do want, because you want that one to end up on the inside.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want that one to be
That's why I
tighter.
was
Yeah.
getting that curling harder.
Yeah, yeah. But you can wait. What I ended up doing, I find it easier to just roll it around and get the whole shape basically. And then once these start coming closer together,
Okay.
then I would take
Okay.
then I take this and tighten that.
Okay.
But then you kind of have the angle right. You kind of know how to hold it on there, right? You've got your thing
Okay.
coming around.
All right.
You may need to actually dip that. This isn't ideal in here, but something like that.
Okay, so Sandra's getting the coal forge fired up. Sandra Dunn has been blacksmithing for about 30 years and currently runs Two Smiths, a blacksmithing shop in Kitchener, Ontario, where they focus on education, public art, and other sculptural types of blacksmithing work. Really interesting stuff, and Sandra's a great teacher. I'll post her contact information in the description. How long from cold to ready to cook does it generally take for the coal? 5 minutes? Okay.
Faster than the propane works.
Now, in order for me to complete my chisel socket, we need a special tool that we don't have on hand, and that's called a bick. We've got a very light one, but we need a heavier one that suits my chisel socket size. So Sandra's making one right now with this big old piece of, 1.5 inch bar stock. I was surprised at how quickly she could knock this thing out, actually. That's what happens when you got 30 years under your belt doing one particular thing.
Pretty. Oh, by the time I
A little more pointy.
forge that, what's that?
Yeah, a little more pointy.
Yeah.
Probably pretty.
Yeah, do a little bit more taper on there, round it out,
Awesome.
smooth it out.
Fantastic.
A lighter hammer for the next piece. I think, yeah,
Yeah.
especially once we sand this down.
Yeah.
This isn't a perfect fit.
Okay.
It'll never always be a perfect fit. You want a bit of room so that you can rotate it. It's not
Okay, got it.
perfect. Yeah. Right? Because there's a bit of room there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay.
So now my socket is ready for fusion welding. The first step towards doing that is getting the scale off of it. So this is fire scale. It's something that's produced naturally when you heat steel up. And so this brushing process takes it away, and there's a point at which it stops producing that fire scale when it hits about that dark red color. And now I'm putting borax on there for flux, and then getting the fire heated up. Now this is arguably the hardest part of the whole process, and that is getting your metal up to the temperature that it's ready for fusion welding. So basically that temperature is about 1 second short of your tool bursting into flames and burning up on you. So you're trying to get it to where it's just starting to spark, and then you got to get it out of the flame and onto your anvil. And I was about 1 second too late in doing that.
I see. Yeah.
I cannot tell you how frustrating this is, because there's no way of gauging by time how long it takes in the fire to get it to this point.
Have a welder. You can fix it with a welder.
As disappointing as that was, and despite my urge to just huck this over the cliff and into the ocean, we decided to try and do a fix. So I chopped out the bad stuff and I forged up a little bit of a patch, and then this was a bit of a bust. So what happened was I was going to do the fusion weld. We were trying to get it up to temperature, and then we cooked it right in the backside here. And then I was making a little patch to fix it when I just popped this in the fire to pinch this down a little bit more to get it to fit better. It was in there for like a minute and it just smoked the end, which drives me nuts because I was in there for the longest time trying to get it up to temperature for the fusion weld. So maybe I'll try fixing it, weld that on, chop it off, see if there's enough socket there for it to be useful. I'll give that a shot, and if it's not, I'll start over on another day. But that's a lot of hours down the toilet, which really pisses me off. But anyhow, weekend was not without some successes. So my Subinomi, while not done, I probably should have put some more time into doing this rather than some other stuff. It's just short of having the tang worked onto the very end of it here, which means I got to pinch this down and then draw out a tang. But at least it's not ruined. I was productive in other ways. A little log dog. So I made a planing stop for my friend Alex, bench stop, and a little hold fast. And of course there's the test Subinomis that we did. Nails. Nails.
It's not a bad day of a few irons in the fire.
Nails, yeah.
Damn.
So, a couple of dozen of those. I like how these guys turned out.
Yeah. Really
By the way, I spilled all that Yankee motor oil into the bottom of your burn barrel, so I gotta pour that back into the can.
nice.
And I decided I was gonna take these test run Subinomis.
Yep.
And I think I'm going to just weld a high-speed steel end onto it.
You might not even need it. You should try it.
That's true. And weld lugs onto this, and then draw out a tang onto
Yep.
it. So I'm going to see if I can make some use out of those.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, poker.
Hardly know her.
Ironically, the thing that was sort of the warm-up is the only one that came out like most refined of the lot.
That's funny. And
Yeah, figures.
well, it's also the thing you already knew how to do.
I guess. Blacksmithing's a pain in the ass. Well, what I can't wrap my head around is how I could be in the fire for so long trying to get my thing up to welding temperature,
And then it trips
and then
over. Like,
I come back later on and I just put my thing in for like 2 minutes, and it frickin' just fries on me.
Well, the fire is always changing, right? It burns from the bottom where the air hits it.
Yeah.
And that means that you've got your highest heat at the bottom.
Yeah.
But also a lot of oxygen in there. And you want to be welding in high heat, but no oxygen. And if the oxygenated layer of the fire
Yeah.
crosses your work, that's when you burn, right?
Yeah.
Because you get. And so you're looking for that time when you've got this narrow section that's got the heat you need and no oxygen. And when the oxygen hits it, sparklers happen almost instantly.
How do you judge that, though?
Well, so I'm thinking that a lot of it has to do with just long-term fire management experience,
Yeah.
right?